and I'll admit defeat. Huang Jihao widened his eyes in shock upon hearing this proposal. Shangguan Qiajian's confident reply only made him more flustered. Do you look down on me? I really want to see the mystery in your sword. Hearing this, Hanju gloomily raised his head and summoned his sword. Then I must trouble you, fellow Taoist Shangguan. The sword appeared, and Huang Jihao's eyes widened in shock. It's over, the senior is even stronger than last time. Shangguan Qiajian was also sweating from the pressure of the aura, gritting his teeth. My body is unconsciously tense, and I can't help but feel the thought of not being able to face this head-on. He raised his hand, preparing to unsheath his sword, but Hanju had already slashed out a sword. A sword was slashed out from the heavenly pillar ghost god sword. It howled like a hurricane, rushing toward Shangguan Qiajian. He was stunned, unable to believe the terrifying speed. The sword was in front of him in the blink of an eye. Suddenly, Shangguan Qiajian was shaken, his mind going into chaos. His entire life's memories seemed to rewind in his mind like a film reel. It started from when Shangguan Qiajian was still happily living at home. Then he joined the Jinwu sect and met the girl he loved. Not long after, Shangguan Qiajian witnessed the scene of his lover wearing a green hat. Then he suffered in love. Afterward, he kept swinging his sword, trying to dispel the pain in his heart. Then he became a ruthless playboy. Those memories replayed as if on loop, leaving Shangguan Qiajian stunned, his mouth agape. Returning to reality, he stood there like he was dead. The sword strike landed beside where he stood, splitting the ground in two. Hanju withdrew his sword and sighed. As expected, the accuracy of my left hand is not as good as my right. Huang Jihao knew he had held back, stunned as if turned to stone. Hanju coldly looked at Shangguan Qiajian. It seems you can't even block my strike. In the next moment, he suddenly knelt down with a thud, catching everyone off guard. Shangguan Qiajian was stunned, unable to believe it. He didn't even have a chance to resist. The first swordsman of the Jinwu sect in Xiyuan continent can't block my strike and still wants to be the world's #1 swordsman? How laughable. Suddenly, Hanju spoke, leaving him stunned. As the saying goes, there are always greater people and higher realms. Without going through storms, how can one see the rainbow? Your talent isn't bad, and if you want to defeat me in the future, it's still possible. He smiled, like an angel in the light, guiding those destined. I value you. These words moved Shangguan Qiajian to the point where his eyes welled up with tears. He slumped, kneeling on the ground with his head lowered, groaning, I lost. Shangguan Qiajian seemed like a soulless corpse, just drained of all vitality. Hanju hurriedly looked at Huang Jihao, greeting him. Did I go too far? Maybe he didn't come to cause trouble, just to seek advice. He turned and said coldly, I held back just now. He should be able to delay today's matter. Don't tell anyone. Suddenly, Shangguan Qiajian shouted to stop Hanju. May I ask, what is your Taoist title? He cautiously probed. Hanju paused slightly, as if thinking about something extremely profound. Then, Hanju turned, coldly curving his lips, and replied with 2 words, reincarnation. Immediately, he vanished in an instant, leaving Shangguan Qiajian staring at him, murmuring that name. Who exactly is this senior? Huang Jihao saw his despairing expression, patted his shoulder, and comforted him. You've done well. At least you weren't injured. I was in a worse situation than you. Shangguan Qiajian didn't respond, still murmuring, this Taoist title, could it be a reclusive great being, experiencing life? It turns out, I am nothing but a frog in a well. At this moment, the system also notified Hanju that Shangguan Qiajian's favorability toward him was 3 stars. Hanju's face darkened. These so-called geniuses, do they always have something? A few reactions and they already like me. There was a time when it was really impressive, but then it went downhill. Li Qingzi cried out in pain. The Yuqing tree was personally planted by the 9 cauldrons ancestor when the sect was founded. He choked, pointing to the ancient tree that had been split in half. It's been over 1,000 years. Who the hell did this? Hearing this, Hanju pretended to be confused. I got lucky and saw it was done by a cat. Of course, Li Qingzi didn't believe it. How could a cat have such power? The wound was still there, and redrawing the map was Very troublesome. Hanju nervously hid in the corner. I was a bit too arrogant in this battle. The formation was too sloppy. Some techniques get stronger as cultivation improves. I need to comprehend a technique that can fight humbly without affecting the surrounding environment. At this moment, on a familiar snow-covered mountain, the snow had piled up thickly, dazzlingly white. A wooden table was smashed in half. Why does this feel like this? Who exactly is targeting me? Dianlua Demon King kept spitting blood, painfully smashing furniture. Suddenly, a demon general walked in to report, Yang Tiandong is here. Upon hearing this, the Demon King took a deep breath and calmed down, then ordered, let him in. Yang Tiandong respectfully walked in and saluted. I heard that father is troubled, so I came here specially to relieve your worries. Tianzu looked very interested and let out an "Oh, you know about my situation?" He immediately said that recently he had sought an oracle from a great person, and the oracle revealed that his troubles were related to his career. Hearing this, the man seemed somewhat surprised. Does this vow have anything to do with the humans I plan to deal with? Yang Tiandong immediately replied, it might not be impossible. Tianzu tiredly raised his hand to cover his forehead. I'd rather believe it's true than not. Perhaps because of this, all the immortals have descended to punish me. He saw everything proceeding as planned and immediately got to the point. Do we need to cancel our plans for the humans? The man lowered his head and sighed. For now, inform everyone to cancel it. Yang Tiandong secretly breathed a sigh of relief. It's so easy to deceive him. Master's great feast is safe. Thinking of this, he raised his ambitious eyes. But that's not enough. I have even grander goals. Not long after, Yang Tiandong walked gloomily through the military camp, thinking, how can a hero lower his head to anyone? In the gloomy sky, a dazzling sun suddenly appeared from the dark clouds. He thought to himself, just wait, Tianzu. Old man. Yang Tiandong turned back and said, the position of the Demon King will be mine sooner or later. 6 months later, in a certain place, Shangguan Qiujian and Huang Jihao sat on a rock wall, talking after defeating someone. Shangguan said he had regained his initial confidence. I plan to return to the Zhenwu sect for seclusion, cultivate my Tao heart, and then go challenge that senior. Hearing that Shangguan dared to go, Huang Jihao sarcastically said, I won't carry you back then. Suddenly, several strange rays of light appeared on the horizon. 2 swords lay quietly on the ground, suddenly shaking violently as if being pulled into the air. Huang Jihao and Shangguan Qiujian were both surprised. Has someone comprehended the eternal sword path again? Suddenly, as if thinking of something, he quickly turned his head. You don't think this is? Shangguan immediately interrupted him. It's absolutely impossible. At this moment, he seemed so desperate that he was on the verge of tears. To comprehend the eternal sword path once in a lifetime is already remarkable. How could he? Huang Jihao still didn't understand, but from the direction, it looks like it's from Dian. Upon hearing this, Shangguan stopped arguing. The strange light spread to the surrounding mountains, forming a mysterious scene. On a mountain slope, a man sat and noticed the phenomenon. Someone has comprehended the eternal sword intent again. After speaking, he took out a talisman and placed it on the ground in front of him, preparing to do something. Then, he raised his hand and formed a hand gesture, beginning to perform the divination technique. Soon after, he suddenly stopped, surprised. I can't continue the divination. He looked at the 2 characters reincarnation written on the paper with confusion. Is reincarnation the law of heaven and earth, or the ability of a cultivator? Meanwhile, at the Yuqing sect, everyone was discussing, the sky is changing, what is going on? Could it be that a great being has appeared? A natural phenomenon, all swords ringing in unison, something terrifying is sure to happen. Hearing this, Li Qianzi hurriedly comforted, everyone doesn't need to worry. Didn't we already experience the sound of 10,000 swords last time? Nothing happened then, so this time there won't be any problems. On the surface, he spoke confidently, but inwardly, he silently cried, why does our generation of Yuqing sect have so many disasters? I wonder if Elder Han Sai has been alerted. If he leaves Yuqing sect because of this, I fear we will never find the sea-settling needle again. At this moment, the familiar slogan carved on the stone inside the cave appeared. Hanju closed his eyes, and a flashing mark appeared in the middle of his forehead. Suddenly, several vague human-like figures appeared in his mind. This made Hanju frown involuntarily. As those figures increased in number, he hurriedly opened his eyes in panic. It was then that Hanju realized he was standing in a strange place, and the figures around him were just like the ones in his thoughts earlier. Where is this? Hanju nervously looked around. I was just in the cave, how did I suddenly end up here? Suddenly, the system reminded him, this is the Sword Dao River, where you can cultivate the Sword Dao. The depth of your understanding determines how far you can go. He immediately understood. Hanju couldn't help but sigh, it's truly vast and boundless. I wonder what the end of the Sword Dao River looks like. The person standing in front of me proves that their Sword Dao ability exceeds mine. I'm so lucky. It's a good thing I didn't go out, or I would probably have been defeated by these people. Thinking of this, he immediately stepped forward, filled with determination. I can't fall behind. I need to catch up with them first. Suddenly, a dazzling light flashed, and Hanju was shaken by the impact. A giant immortal appeared and said in a deep voice, you, immortal, want to enter the immortal realm? You are not qualified. Leave now. Upon hearing the words immortal realm, Hanju was immediately shocked. The immortal's eyes gleamed, and then he shouted, go. His voice was deafening. As soon as the words were spoken, several dazzling sword energies shot towards the spot where Hanju was standing. Hanju, stunned, couldn't react in time. His face remained pale, filled with fear. A second later, Hanju's body was surrounded by smoke, and the surrounding scenery became unclear. He threw his head back in agony and let out a heart-rending scream, as if undergoing intense torture. After a moment, the smoke dissipated, and Hanju knelt on one knee, panting heavily. He gritted his teeth in anger. Who is that person? With just sword energy, he can hurt me from the air. Luckily, he had no killing intent, or my primordial soul might have been suppressed. Suddenly, the system popped up. Notification. Hanju has comprehended the Tai sword intent or reincarnation sword intent. When he saw the words Tai level, his eyes widened, and he exclaimed, a mortal dares to enter the immortal realm. Hanju recalled what the immortal had said earlier, unless this is a realm beyond the mortal world, isn't the immortal realm the world after ascension? He darkly raised his hand to summon the spell from earlier. The people on the Sword Dao River have an average cultivation of Great Ascension False Void. This makes it clear, the higher the cultivation, the stronger the sword intent. Hanju rotated two of his fingers. Then he flicked these two fingers. When enemies come to challenge in the future, use the reincarnation sword intent to respond in control, without causing too much commotion. At this moment, in front of the cave, Zun Chang'an was focusing on practicing swordsmanship, facing a scarecrow. In front of him was a scarecrow decorated like Hanju. Suddenly, the scarecrow's head was chopped off. Zun Chang'an hadn't even drawn his sword yet, and he widened his eyes in shock. Chang'an stared blankly at the sword in his hand, stunned for a moment, his expression confused. Then he cried out joyfully like a child, Master, I finally have sword energy. On a full moon night, in the demon cultivation sect, everything was still as usual. In the arena, several pairs were fiercely battling, determined to force each other into a deadlock. Su Chi, bored, rested his chin on his hand and looked at the sky. Master, why haven't you made a move yet? I'm about to be forced into practicing demonic skills. Just then, someone suddenly jumped down from the sky, covering the entire moon. He landed with a thud and loudly shouted, Stop training. Elder Shao he had passed away, and all the disciples immediately bowed. The man solemnly announced. As soon as the words were spoken, everyone immediately couldn't believe it and began discussing whether it was true or not. Su Chi was also shocked, murmuring to himself, I was just listening to his teachings this morning, and now he's gone. He suddenly suspected that his master had started making a move. After a while, in a spacious room, moonlight spilled over the coffin placed in the center. Inside the coffin was Xiaohe, dressed in white, his eyes closed. Du Quan, the sect leader of the demon cultivation sect, looked up and asked, We've done our best. This secret method can only maintain the soul body for 15 minutes. You passed away suddenly today, do you have any unfinished business to address? Xiao He's residual soul expressed that he was unwilling to die without knowing the truth. Hearing this, Du Quan explained that, from the signs, he died due to the end of his lifespan, but Elder Two suspects that Xiao He died due to a curse. He suddenly seemed to understand something. No wonder my luck has always been bad, encountering inner demons during cultivation, with my progress regressing instead of advancing. The few disciples below angrily asked Xiao He, do you know who did it? We will surely avenge our senior brother. He showed a troubled expression, because I've already killed all my enemies. Unfortunately, the difficult-to-recover body was preparing to regain strength. At this point, Xiao He suddenly remembered something and widened his eyes. That plan was interrupted. His mind conjured Han Ju's face. Since returning from Dian, I've encountered a series of unfortunate events. How could he possibly have such power? But in the end, the only remaining explanation was the truth. Du Quan looked at the situation in panic. Not good, junior brother is angry, this will speed up the soul's dissipation. Xiao Yi desperately held on to the last bit of his strength and admonished, I only have one last thing to say, absolutely do not go to Dian. And never provoke Yuking sect of Dian. After saying this, Xiao Yi's soul completely dissipated. The disciples immediately cried bitterly, regretting Xiao Yi's summon of the demon dragon and the hidden treasures. After a while, Du Quan asked in confusion, where is Dian? But the people around him also didn't know. Should we send someone to investigate? He immediately waved his hand, too dangerous, didn't you hear junior brother's last words? Even provoking them is not allowed, what kind of low-level place is this? At this moment, the system notified Han Ju that Xiao Yi had passed away. He was eating noodles when he saw the notification and was greatly shocked. On the familiar snowy mountain top, a scream echoed from within the cave. Dian Su angrily punched the ice wall, shattering it into pieces. Then, he crazily closed his eyes, gritted his teeth, and charged into the wall. After a while, Dian Su roared madly, I can't take it anymore, why is this happening? I clearly made a promise to the heavens, why do I still have to endure this suffering? Yang Tiandong, terrified, almost cried, hugging his legs in a corner, surrounded by shattered debris. He painfully turned his head and asked him, what do you think we should do? Yang Tiandong calmed down and seriously suggested, perhaps the immortals and gods want to see your actual actions? Dian Su curiously said, explain. Yang Tiandong analyzed, for example, shouldn't you visit and befriend human sects? Maybe the immortals and gods will change their opinion of you. He impatiently complained, visit sects? Are you joking? With so many sects in Dian, do you want me to visit every single one and talk cheerfully with those cultivators? He immediately smiled, you can just pick any sect to visit, it's enough to show a symbolic gesture. After hearing this, Dian Su suddenly remembered that Han Ju had asked him which sect he was from. Yang Tiandong hurriedly replied, it's Yuking sect. He immediately made a decision, let's leave today, we'll go right away. Then he realized something, wait, I haven't notified Master. Yang Tiandong quickly spoke to stop him, humans care a lot about first impressions, you should put on some makeup. If done right, making friends will be half the success. Dian Su immediately complained. In the end, he said it wasn't possible, but his body was very honest. He sighed in distress, can it really succeed halfway? Yang Tiandong suppressed his laughter, yes, very practical. After a while, when they arrived at the gate of Yuking sect, Dian Su shouted loudly, where is the sect master? Of Yuking sect? Come out and meet this king. Yang Tiandong quickly muttered, making friends is not like this. At this moment, Han Ju also received the notification that the strongest demon king, Dian Su, was at Yuking sect. He furrowed his brow, thinking cautiously, how did he come here? In front of him, Han Ju saw someone exactly like Dian Su, glaring fiercely, radiating a murderous aura. Han Ju raised his sword and jumped, leaping into the air. No one had time to explain. He spoke first, that guy has his mouth wide open with sharp teeth. A force surged out of his mouth, gushing like a faucet. He also swung his sword, continuously casting techniques, reincarnation sword intent, 3 clear world-ending thunderstorm, 9 dragon